Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 6:15 PM and a quorum of members is present, so the meeting of the Board of Education of the School District of New Berlin is called to order. Please call the roll.
Ms. Crosby?
Here.
Mr. Helmer?
Here.
Ms. Konick?
Here.
Ms. Schultz?
Here.
Mr. Seidel?
Here.
Ms. Spindler?
Here.
Mr. Zelinski?
Here.
I would entertain a motion to recess the closed session.
I move to adjourn into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85 1C, E, and F of the Wisconsin statutes to consider A, discuss and approve the superintendent goals from 2023 to 2024. B, discuss approve superintendent goals for 2024 to 2025. C, approval of closed session minutes of October 28th, and D, employment performances and compensation matters pertaining to staff.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Crosby and a second by Mr. Seidel. Please call the roll.
Ms. Crosby?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mr. Helmer?
Yes.
Ms. Konick?
Yes.
Ms. Schultz?
Yes.
Ms. Spindler?
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski?
We are moving into closed session and return to open session around 7 o'clock. It is now 7:04, and we are returning from closed session into open session. In recognition of the serious and important nature of our efforts here, we will join in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. For all those who are able, please rise. And now for those who wish to prepare for the meeting, we will have a moment of silence. This is a public meeting of the Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, notice was given to the public last Friday by providing the agenda to the city library. The agenda was also posted on the district website. A copy of the agenda was forwarded to the Journal Sentinel, the Waukesha Freeman, and the Waukesha Now, all of which have filed requests for all public notices. First up, we have privilege of the floor. Are there any this evening?
No.
Okay. Then President's message and announcements. I just have a message for Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day. Thank you for all those who served. We did have a very nice Veterans Day event this morning at Eisenhower. And so I encourage anybody, if you didn't get to go this year, please join us next year. And also, just to recognize, we do have 2 veterans on the board. So Mr. Seidel and Mr. Zielinski are both veterans. So thank you for your service. So on to the administrative team report. We have a superintendent update and the student update.
I'll defer my updates as we do have 2 rather cumbersome presentations to share with the board, and so I'll hand it over directly to Claire.
All right, this school year is well underway with the first quarter wrapped up last week. Recently, Eisenhower welcomed admissions counselor Miss Megan Thompson from University of Wisconsin-Madison to provide information about Madison and help our students for the future. Additionally, it was National School Psychology Week, and on behalf of the Eisenhower students, we want to thank the staff that puts in countless effort to ensure we are the best we can be and provide never-ending support and encouragement. November is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and our wonderful HOSA Club hosted an Alzheimer's Awareness movie night on November 8th and showed a short film and brought in experts to provide a greater understanding of Alzheimer's. New Berlin DECA has been planning their annual father-daughter dance, which will take place December 6th at Elmwood Elementary. This wonderful event will offer dancing, crafts, pictures, and so much more. I want to recognize some great senior projects from the fall season for National Honor Society. Fall senior projects include Elena's Trick or Can event, Nico's Frame Park cleanup, and Jacob Souza's coat drive. Fall sports seasons have been wrapping up with their postseason. It was a joy to see all of the success of each sport this past fall. Congratulations to girls volleyball on making it to the sectional semifinals. Cross country went state-bound and had a wonderful meet at the Ridges Golf Course. New Berlin United was sectional champions and went to state last week. Lastly, congrats to the boys soccer team for making it to the sectional semifinals. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the consent agenda, which includes notice and the approval of minutes of the board meeting of October 28th. Are there any items that should be pulled out for separate consideration? Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Seidel and a second by Mr. Helmer to approve the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes. On to our regular agenda. First on the regular agenda is Teaching and Learning Presentation 2, the Forward and ACT.
So we have our teaching and learning team here to present. As per the board's request, we have a presentation calendar and cadence. And while you heard from the team about our FastBridge data at the last meeting, we are moving forward with the forward exam and ACT data and information. So I'll have them introduce themselves as they come up, and we'll move through.
All right, good evening. My name is Matt Stepneski. I'm very fortunate to be the Director of Elementary Schools here in the School District of New Berlin. And then with me later on, you'll hear from Kelly Kwiatkowski, Director of Secondary Schools, and then Amanda Mazurkowitz, our Director of Student Services. All right, let's see. All right, do we have this update one? Maybe not, hey? Okay. Okay. That's okay. So before I jump into the slides, we actually wanted to share kind of some of the changes to the forward exam. We appreciate the school board did a nice job of asking us a lot of questions on what they wanted clarification on. And that's really what this first part is. So I'll just kind of go through that just for the public's benefit. But essentially the forward exam, there's a new scoring system for ELA and math. And so the cut score has changed for those two subjects, along with performance level descriptions. There was also a shift in the standards that the test is aligned to. And so with the updated performance levels, you'll, instead of seeing words like below basic, basic, proficient, and advanced, it's now approaching, developing, meeting, and advanced. And then along with that also came scores. So what used to be maybe a proficient score in ELA used to be a 570. Now it's a 1560. So DPI has just given us guidance to say, treat these scores as year one, as if it's a brand new test. And then next year at this time, we'll be able to compare. We have other comparisons that we've tried to do, but we'll get to those throughout the presentation. But essentially, this is what DPI has said. They've shifted the focus to be aligning ELA and math to standards from 2021 and 2020. And narrowing the focus, greater number sense, deeper understanding, more algebra, things like that for math. For ELA, there used to be like a 5-paragraph essay, like a text-dependent analysis. That was removed. There's now 2 one-paragraph essays that the kids have to write, along with a listening session that was also removed. So the test changed a little bit. The standards that they're aligned to has changed. And then unfortunately, the scores have also changed, and now it's difficult for us to compare, but we're going to do our best. All right. One question that the board did ask was that if the forward exam was aligned to the science of reading, and there is no direct alignment, but we are, teaching the same standards that the test does measure for. And some of those same standards, as we talk about kind of an item analysis of really determining what's on this test, are the same ones that are in our, that are addressed in our curriculum. Key details and ideas, craft and structure, vocabulary use, things like that for ELA. And I touched on the ones for math earlier with algebra and number sense, things like that. All right, so as we jump into the presentation, let's see where we're at. So if DPI is considering this to be year one, this is currently where we are, and this is third graders, all of our students. And you'll see that since the cut scores have changed, essentially, the percentage of kids that are meeting and advanced is typically higher. This is third grade ELA. Now, this is actually an area to highlight, and so even before the cut score change, this cohort group, third graders to fourth graders, again, not a true cohort, not exactly the same kids, but the majority of kids are the same. They were already showing growth even before the cut score change, so that was, an area for us to highlight. This is our third grade math, okay, the percentage of all students meeting or advanced. And then here's that group of kids as a cohort. Now, the social studies and science cut scores did not change. So that is the same. And so we are able to compare data over time, over the last couple of years. And so this is another area for us to highlight, almost 80% of the kids being meeting and advanced. And one thing that Kelly might allude to as well is that our social studies curriculum involves a lot of reading. And so we feel that we were fortunate that the kids, a lot of our kids, almost 80% of our kids can access those readings and be able to do well in social studies. Here's science. This is actually an area of growth for us. And so with the cut scores not changing, we've been able to see that we're a little stagnant here. And so currently we are doing some alignment. We had a science committee meet last year of teachers and directors to look at the science curriculum, met with FOSS over the summer and kind of combined the feedback from both groups. And now we're aligning those science standards, trying to come up with common assessments. That work is happening this year so that next year we can all be on the same scope and sequence, essentially. This is a slide that the board has asked for in the past where you can compare, again, not true cohorts, not the same kids, but the majority of kids as they've gone from grade level to grade level. And so one thing that you can see here, areas to highlight, there's obviously, some really nice growth as we talked about in some areas. There was growth even before the cut score change. But then the area for growth for us is that there are some grade levels that did not go up even with the cut score change. And so we've had meetings with principals or building meetings to say, let's focus in on these grade levels that did not grow as much, even with the changes. Here's that same kind of chart by grade level, but comparing us to some local districts. This is us for math by grade level. If you follow one color, that kind of gives you that cohort data over time, how they grew from grade level to grade level. So this is math, and then the same chart with neighboring districts by grade level for math. That yellow line representing that there was a change in cut scores. So as we talked about, we're looking at the growth of that cohort, 3rd to 4th grade cohort data even before the cut score change. As Amanda will speak to, students with disabilities, that subgroup grew a lot in ELA and math. And then as we said, areas for growth. There were grade levels that did not grow even though we had the score change. And then we talked about science as well. And then points of emphasis, when the buildings came up here last year to talk about specific elementary schools and even secondary, they talked about the culture of assessment and really sharing with the kids the importance of the Forward exam. We are, as we do every year, following cohort groups at each school. We're looking at students, student scores individually, and also, of course, by their grade level. And then a few things we want to try for this year. We've talked about the math as a review year. So we're, of course, diving into that work and how it aligns to the Forward exam. We're also going to take a look at item analysis and really figure out which standards the assessment is addressing. We kind of do this every year, but then also just with the changes, make sure that that's still the same. And then how our curriculum and our scope and sequence aligns to when the kids are learning these things before the test happens. All right. Thank you.
Happy Veterans Day. Same thing as Matt said with the change in the cut scores and the change in the assessments for the Forward tests at the secondary level. Here you can see Forward ELA, and that includes writing and reading, as well as some grammar. And that is 7th to 8th grade. This is a true cohort. This is 7th grade ELA when just looking at 7th grade students. This is math. 76% of students met or advanced. And then this is looking at math, that cohort from 7th to 8th grade. And so that's taking out students who didn't take it either their 7th grade year or the 8th grade year. So that's why the numbers are a little bit different when you're looking at the 7th grade to the 7th grade on both slides. And then this is 8th grade science. So like Matt said, the science and social studies assessments did not change as far as cut scores. So we saw some nice growth in science with our 8th grade students, as well as social studies. The same image that Matt showed, this is our district over time and their performance. And again, there's that orange bar there because this year was a different assessment for ELA. And this is comparing to our neighboring districts for ELA. The same thing for math. In our neighboring districts.
Hello. So we're just going to take a couple of minutes to walk through some comparison data with looking at our target subgroups and then how our target subgroups are performing compared to some of our other Waukesha County peers. This slide, you've seen this slide before, board and others that have watched our presentations from earlier this school year, a couple weeks ago, when we just wanted to give a picture of our overall demographics within our school district. So looking from 2020 all the way up through this current school year, and this data was our third Friday count in September that's reported publicly to DPI. And so one of the things that you'll notice is that our students with disabilities have stayed relatively stable in the percentage over the last couple of years, but we have had still an increase of students each year. And then our highest changing subgroup that we have that we track is our students who have limited English proficiency, also known as our English language learners. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, even though we had 141 students at our third Friday count, we have 156 students right now. So even in the last 6 weeks or so, we've had an influx of more students. The next couple of slides, when we look at all of the Waukesha County districts, we're more similarly situated to the ones that you'll see on the next couple of slides that are highlighted in terms of the overall percentage of that subgroup. So this slide is looking at students with disabilities, and so our closest comparisons this last school year would have been Pewaukee and Hamilton. When we look at the percentage of students who are considered English language learners, or again, who have limited English proficiency, we would be closest in percentage to Elmbrook and Menominee Falls over the last couple of years. Oconomowoc and Pewaukee the years before that. And then lastly, another target subgroup that we look at a lot with our data are students who are considered economically disadvantaged, or in other words, students who come from a low socioeconomic background. And we are most similarly situated to Mukwonago and Kettle Moraine this last school year, and then you can see the other districts that we have been more similar to in the last couple of years. And again, one of the reasons that we do that is to try to, when we're comparing ourselves and then trying to have really targeted conversations with those other districts about what's working, what are you doing well, what's not going well for you, so that we can try to emulate some of the success that our neighbors are having. Some of those conversations are better to have with other districts that are more similar to us or see a similar demographic. As Matt and Kelly both talked about, and as we've talked about as a school district, the test isn't the same. And so it's really frustrating for us as we've thought we've had some nice plans in place. We're thinking that we're on the right track, and then we're using the forward as a metric for some of that success. And when it's not the same test from last year that we have in prior years, it's hard to see that trajectory. So one of the things that we did is we did a gap analysis looking at other districts around us with their level of proficiency, so either that proficient or advanced, or now last year, the meeting or advanced categories, to look at the students who would be proficient on the forward exam, us compared to other districts. So when you look at this slide, you look at 2022 and 23 school year, and then the 23-24 school year would have been where we had the cut score change, where all districts were affected by that. And so what this slide does in ELA is it tells us that we are closing the gap in districts that were outperforming us. And then the same thing here with math. You can take a look at situated similar to the last slide with looking at that gap analysis. So when you see a negative, it's that, for example, with Elmbrook, we were negative 5.7 percentage points away, the total number of students that they had proficient and advanced. And then this last test cycle, we were 1.5 percentage points away. So what does that tell us when we look at then subgroup data? And so again, you'll see that same highlighting system that we had on the previous slides, where the districts that are more similar to us in that demographic in that target year are highlighted on this slide pink. So students who are economically disadvantaged, where you would have also seen our rankings. So for example, in 22-23, we were kind of in quote 8th place, and then we've made some improvement up to 6th place this last school year. And then those farthest columns, when you're looking at the ELA change, again, is that growth percentile points of change. And we're looking at students who are meeting or meeting or advanced. This slide is looking at ELA achievement for students with disabilities. This slide is students who are English learners in ELA. And then the next couple of slides will be the same, but just looking at math. So here's math comparing students who are economically disadvantaged across those districts. Students with disabilities, the growth there with those comparative school districts. And then students who are English learners in math. And Kelly's going to come back up and talk about pre-ACT and ACT.
Thank you. Our students in 9th and 10th grade take the pre-ACT Secure test. This year was the second year that they took the pre-ACT Secure and not the pre-ACT test, so there was a slight difference. This shows the percent proficient, and I decided to use the pre-ACT Secure definition of the benchmark in college and career readiness that has not changed over the last 2 years, where the DPI cut score has. So you're going to see two different cut scores that I'm going to show you depending on the slide. One has changed, one has not. This has not changed. So you can see we had a slight increase in reading, and then slight decrease in math, English, and science. And this is 9th and 10th grade students combined. When looking at just the 9th grade students for pre-ACT cut scores, we saw a slight increase. And for our 10th grade students, we saw a slight decrease. And again, this is pre-ACT cut scores for composite scores. When looking at 2 years ago, the 9th grade students and how they performed as 10th grade students, so this example is not a true cohort, so these are just the 9th grade students captured spring of 23, and then the 10th grade students captured spring of 24. We did see a growth of 2 points within those students, and we wanted to compare the growth with the other school districts. Again, these are the pre-ACT definition of predicted ACT, not the state of Wisconsin, DPI. This comes right from ACT. Again, this is pre-ACT secure cut scores. We saw a slight decrease in math, and this is 9th and 10th grade students combined. And so did many other districts. And sometimes the tests from one year to the next is harder or easier depending. We'll talk about that when we get to ACT. Pre-ACT secure is also similar in nature. In English, reading, we saw a slight increase. In science. When looking at the Department of Public Instruction's cut scores for mathematics with 9th and 10th grade students combined, and again, different cut scores, we saw an increase. English language arts, increase. And that concludes the pre-ACT portion of the presentation. On to ACT. So ACT in the state of Wisconsin, if you'll remember, all of our 11th grade students take the assessment in March. And these were our average ACT test scores the last 4 years. When comparing ourselves to Waukesha County, last year, this exact same slide, we saw some 23s and 24s. This year, we're not seeing 23s and 24s. Everybody went down a little bit. Not everybody, the majority of people went down a little bit. It seems to be a harder assessment that the students took in March. For example, we were blown away. We had 38 students who scored above a 30 on the March assessment in the district. Right now, we have over 50 students who've scored over a 30. The same class, they just retook it at a different assessment time, and they did better. So this class particular, we're gonna see a jump from their junior assessment to their graduating ACT assessment class. I can't show you even the graduating class of 2024 because that's not available yet on the WISE-Public. But for the graduating class of 2025, which Claire is a part of, we will see an increase in the ACT scores from their junior year till now. Just looking at those number of 30s, there's no way that score can't go up. But you can see Eisenhower was the second highest in Waukesha County, and West was in the middle. ACT subtests, so we look at English, reading, math, and science. Here's a fun fact, or not so fun, depending on your thoughts. In the fall of 2025, the ACT test itself is going to change nationally. So science will no longer be a contributor to that composite score. All the tests will be a little bit shorter, but students will have more time to answer the questions. So significant change for our students. They won't see that change in the spring assessment of 11th grade for our students, but we will see it next fall. So we're going to see some wonky comparisons coming up in the future. And then some areas to highlight. Our 8th graders are ranked second in Waukesha County in ELA, math, and social studies. We saw some growth when the tests didn't change in science and social studies, as I highlighted. And we are closing achievement gaps when comparing to some of the other districts. On areas for growth is our 7th graders are ranked 6th in Waukesha County in ELA and math. So we know our 7th grade students need additional help. They're going to be 8th grade this year. So we have some gaps to help fill with those students. For ACT, we grew in mathematics, and 22 to 23, and then to 23, 24, we had some drops in ACT, English, reading, and science. So again, it's digging into those scores to figure out, was it a harder test? Did our students really decline? And why? Are we doing something different? So we're in the process of digging into that data right now to figure out if there's something different that we can do. I have an announcement for the board. For the second year in a row, we were named Gold Award winners at both Eisenhower and West by the AP College Board. We're 2 out of 4 schools in Waukesha County to get this award, the other 2 being Brookfield Central and Brookfield East. We're really proud of this recognition, and I think we are 2 out of 11 of the state of Wisconsin public school districts to get this award. So congratulations to Eisenhower and West. We are continuing the culture of assessment at secondary, so overall, it's a math curriculum review year, as Matt stated. We're continuing with the item analysis. That's something we really dug into for science and social studies in middle school, and we think we saw growth due to that this year, so we're going to keep at it and do a better job even for this year. Any questions?
Can you walk me through slides 33 through 38? That was the subgroup ones. And is that the gap between what we closed from last year, or gap? I wasn't sure I followed those numbers.
So on here, this would be the percentage of students who are meeting expectations on that exam. And so to answer your question, Mitch, like closing the gap. So essentially when you're looking at the rankings, so last year we would have been mostly compared to Kettle Moraine, Pewaukee, and Mukwonago in the 22-23, I'm sorry, not last year, but the previous cycle with assessment. And we were in, for lack of a better, 8th place in terms of our overall achievement. But then when we look to last year's, even though, yes, everybody's cut scores changed, still trying to look at those comparative districts, and our most comparative districts would have been Kettle Moraine and Mukwonago, but we have improved. And when you're looking at the ELA change, that would be the percent of change, so the increase of the percentage of students who would have been meeting or advanced. And so, yes, we had more room to grow because we were further down the list, but I think the point is that we did grow, and we're moving in the right direction, and that's one of the things that we're trying to look at in terms of comparing ourselves to other districts. Is what we're doing working? Are we growing? Are we closing those gaps?
Thank you.
Yep.
Does anybody have anything else?
One of the things that we've always looked at is exceeds and meets. And it seems like they're kind of lowering that bar to almost include approaching, do we have to go the other way and start looking at only exceeds as they continue to lower that bar? Or is that another metric we should be using?
So the new cut scores still only include meeting in advance. They're not going down to approaching. Now, what meeting means
Yeah.
has changed, but it's still only looking at the top two indicators, so meeting in advance. So not approaching. Now, approaching is not a part of that. But what meeting in advance means is
The old approaching is probably close to the current meets.
it could be. We
don't even know.
We didn't get any guidance from DPI on that. So yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
My only concern with the numbers we're looking at, by the way, the numbers are all great. I'm very happy to see the increases we've seen. My only concern, and it's nothing to do with you guys, is as the state continues to lower that bar, we're really not measuring what meets is. And I don't know a better way to do it. So if you guys have any ideas, I'm looking for some thoughts and feedback from you guys.
I think one of the things that we talk to a lot about with Joe and with our, executive team and with our principals is that's why using multiple pieces of data, because this test hasn't been super reliable in giving us that. And with, people thinking, too, that potentially it's being watered down or what meeting looks like is easier than it was in the past potentially. That might not be the best metric for us. So trying to look at that with FastBridge, with classroom assessments, with grades and all of that to try to see what our students are doing.
Thank you.
Anything else? No? Okay, we can move on next one. Thank you.
Thank you.
So then we have the Outdoor Facilities Task Force presentation.
I would like to introduce to you the chair of the Outdoor Facilities Task Force, Mr.
Fireworks and anything?
Dave Cody.
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. I'm excited to share some information with you guys, catch you guys up on where things are. If you remember back in the spring, you guys commissioned a task force, and here is what I believe is not the final update, but our final update as far as meeting the needs of the board and getting to the point where you've asked us to get to. So again, tonight we're just going to do a quick recap of the process and then where we are after several months of meetings and conversations. I'm going to review the task force recommendations, the actual recommendations from the task force that they made to Superintendent Garza. From there, I'll turn it over to Mr. Garza, and he can talk about his recommendations to the school board, and then we can discuss some next steps. If you will recall, this is kind of a shortened version of the resolution that you guys signed and presented to us. It was kind of the guardrails, so to speak, as far as what we could and couldn't do with the task force. A lot of that, one of the things that we had to emphasize several times throughout the process was that we were looking at ways to move forward within non-referendum budget parameters. Again, those are set by you, the school board. We are on track. Like I said, I just want to point out some dates. We have, November 1st was when we were to present, the task force was to present our recommendations to Superintendent Garza, which we've done. And then now Mr. Garza is presenting his recommendations to you, and we're going to beat that December 1st deadline by quite a bit. I'm just going to walk you through the task force. I know some of you are already familiar with the task force, but for those who weren't able to attend a meeting or haven't gotten an update recently, I just want to start with a little bit of background. Eisenhower and West are the only high schools in Waukesha County that do not have any synthetic turf playing surfaces. And we're two of only 6 conference schools without any synthetic turf. All of our contiguous neighbors have synthetic turf in their multi-use athletic stadiums. That includes Whitnall, Elmbrook, Muskego, West Allis, and I think that's Whitnall, did I say that? Waukesha, yes. Everybody who surrounds us has some type of synthetic turf. Some of them even have additional turf surfaces, synthetic turf surfaces, that is, for their baseball and or softball facilities. Eisenhower and West tracks are in disrepair. They do need to be repaired soon. They need to be fully reconstructed. And other potential upgrades that we've kind of looked at and shared with the task force, such as the addition of some lights or some reconfiguration of some playing spaces, could result in more usage, availability, rentals, and all those sorts of things. How did we form the task force? We invited dozens of people, and by we, it was largely myself and both of our athletic directors. We did take recommendations from the school board. We took recommendations from administration to come up with as many people as we could to bring them together and have conversations about what we could do next. About 55 people accepted the invitation, including Meg and Dale here, who are in the audience today. 42 of them at least attended one meeting. We did have equal representation on both sides of town, which was important to us. We didn't want the room filled with Eisenhower people or the room filled with West people. We also had quite a bit of representation from individuals who had students in the younger grades and not necessarily at Eisenhower or West. I do want to thank Amy and Renee for participating on the task force and attending the meetings and being a part of it. That was a great addition. We appreciate you. As Joe mentioned, I was the chairperson, and Ann was the task force secretary, so Joe should have mentioned that too at the beginning. And then Joe, Pat, Andy Stefanson, who's no longer with the district, Matt Newman, our athletic directors, and Julia Cordero attended several of the meetings, if not all the meetings, and were kind of, they were members but not really members. I'm gonna walk through a little bit of how the 4 meetings went. We started back in May. We met over at the West Little Theater. We kind of went through a current update on what our facilities look like, kind of some of the things that I just shared with you now. We did discuss preliminary draft plans. I guess it's almost a year and a half ago now maybe, we did contract with Point of Beginnings to get some preliminary plans done as far as, so that we had something that we could talk about, look at, kind of figure out where we could go next. They looked at the outdoor facilities over at Eisenhower and at West, and they kind of put together an everything. If we could do everything, these were the suggestions that they had. And that included, like I said, turfing some fields, adding some lights, reconfiguring some spaces. Excuse me. From that, now remember that was about a year and a half ago, so some of these costs have changed. The dollar amounts have changed because the longer we wait, the more expensive things are going to get. But the cost to upgrade two of the both multi-purpose stadiums, and I was just saying, not just turf, but do full upgrades, range from anywhere from 6.8 to 9.9 million. Cost to improve both baseball and softball fields range from 2 million to 4.9 million. Cost to upgrade some practice green space over at Eisenhower is about $500,000. And all the project costs are very dependent on scope and several other factors, including, like I just mentioned, the time and how quickly things are to move forward. Also, as a reminder, in our long-range plan, the school board has committed to approximately $1 million per school to upgrade the tracks. That is in the long-range plan. It's been in there for several years, and it's several years down the line, but one of those things, if we can move it up to help move this project along, I think we could find a way to do that. The next 3 meetings, in June, we met again at West, and we talked a little bit about what a capital campaign would look like and the key functions of that campaign. We shared information about Fund 41, which is the long-range facilities plan. We did talk, and 21, which is our donation fund. I did share information about the naming rights program, the successes we've had so far, and some of the momentum we could see if we were to head in this direction. And then Julie, the foundation director, shared quite a bit of information about how the Education Foundation could play a role in a capital campaign. In August, we were in this room, and we invited a panel from South Milwaukee. We had 4 individuals from South Milwaukee, including their athletic director, and then 3 volunteers who helped run their fundraising campaign. They just recently completed their project where they turfed their football or their multi-purpose stadium field, as well as their baseball and softball fields. Their project was about 1/3 of a district commitment, 1/3 of fundraising, and then 1/3 of grants, grants, et cetera, et cetera. So they kind of they split their project. It was a lot cheaper. Again, what we talk about a lot in our district, we're a little bit unique in that we have 2 of everything. South Milwaukee did not have that, so their price tag was much lower than our potential price tag. And then September, we were here again. We discussed some survey results, which I'll get into in a second. We did start discussing our draft recommendations to Mr. Garza, and then we also discussed the emergence of a fundraising group, which I will also get to in a second as well. Prior to that September meeting, I did send out a survey to all the members, all the task force members. 28 of them did end up responding. I do want to point out that none of the administrators participated in it. I didn't participate, so the results weren't skewed in any way as far as administration filling out that survey. The first question we asked is, of the projects that we've kind of talked about over the several months, where would you rank them? What's of most importance to you? 27 of the 28 members all chose a stadium project as their top choice. 16 of those respondents actually chose both Eisenhower and West as their top two choices. And again, I mention that because we did have a very even split between Eisenhower and West. In fact, of the 28 members who completed the survey, 14 identified themselves as it was 11 were Eisenhower supporters, 11 were West supporters, and the other were both. They identified themselves as both, so we had an even split right down the middle. Baseball and softball upgrades also received strong support. Not as strong as the stadiums, but still strong nonetheless. A majority of the respondents were against a single shared multi-purpose synthetic, read it real slow, Dave, against a single shared multi-purpose synthetic turf stadium. An example of that would be like West Dallas, Hale, and Central, who have a stadium that they use. A majority of our respondents were against doing something like that. Similarly, a majority of the respondents were against upgrading one on-campus baseball facility and sharing it, or one on-campus softball facility and sharing that as well. And then about 61% indicated they were interested if we were to do a shared baseball or softball facility, an off-campus, something that would be centrally located, maybe partnering with the city. That was something that they were still interested in doing. We also discussed in the survey what interest there was as far as starting a capital campaign, starting a fundraising program to get these projects rolling. Exactly 3/4 of respondents said that they would, in partnership with a community-led committee, or that the district should move forward in this fashion. Also, 61% again felt that the project should be split into phases, in part to lessen the amount needed, the fundraising amount needed right at the beginning, and also in order to kind of make sure that we still have playing surfaces available for the schools as we move forward. I did ask a question. It was kind of a range of dollar amounts as far as what amount could be raised in a capital campaign, and most respondents, a slight majority, said at least $6 million could be raised. A little higher number, 68%, indicated that $6 million should be raised, and I read that as they want to raise more so that we can do more. Both Meg and Dale are a part of this group, the New Berlin United Athletic Foundation. Foundation, that's right. They came to us right before the September meeting and shared some information with me that they were coming together. There was 8, I don't know if you're still at 8-ish. 8 members that from the task force that had kind of come together and joined a smaller coalition of individuals who wanted to collaborate with the district and continue to move things forward, especially when it comes to the fundraising piece. We emphasized throughout the process that without that, it would be very difficult for this project to move forward. We really do need the volunteers and individuals to come forward and help with the fundraising. Their focus is definitely on the playing surface pieces, and I'll get into some of the other things that we talked about that they're not as interested in supporting or helping out with at this time. And also they're very interested in having equal improvements on both campuses. So if we do a multi-purpose stadium at Eisenhower, they want to do a multi-purpose stadium at West as well, and vice versa, or the same goes for baseball and softball. So very even fundraising on both sides of town to have equal opportunities for all the students on both sides of town as well. We have already had one meeting with the NBUAF. a couple weeks ago, and we're actually meeting with them again tomorrow afternoon. These are the task force recommendations in a nutshell. You can click the link. I think the entire, I think all the recommendations were included. The report was included in your packet, so you have all that information. I'll read through these very quickly, but a lot of them are very much in line with the survey results. Essentially, the task force wants the district to launch a capital campaign in conjunction with a community-led group of volunteers. The campaign should focus on multi-purpose stadium improvements first, and then address baseball, softball playing surface upgrades in a second phase of fundraising, if when possible. Again, getting away from that shared facility idea, but upgrading on both sides of town, both schools, with that possible exception of maybe a baseball, softball upgrade. We have had some preliminary conversations with the city about that, and I don't know that it's going anywhere at this time. The survey results did yield quite a bit of optimism about what could and should be fundraised, but the task force did not make a formal recommendation to Superintendent Garza about those dollar amounts, just because there's still a lot of unknowns as far as what that would look like, and what how much that total should be. And then myself recommended to Superintendent Garza that we continue to work with the NBUAF and see how we can work together, as well as having the district provide various resources, including financial, our time, our expertise, and those sorts of things to that group as needed. These are just some other considerations, again, in your report, but things I want to point out. Throughout the process, the task force members all had expressed concerns about the amount needed to be fundraised. It is a large amount depending on the scope and scale of the project. It is millions of dollars, and at this point, I'm not aware of any fundraisers that, or any donors that we have stepping to the front of the line and are ready to donate. I may be wrong, and I hope I am, but at this point, we don't have anything lined up, so there is some concern about the amount that needs to be fundraised. I mentioned the grandstands here. I didn't mention them previously, but when I talked about how the NBUAF is interested in playing surfaces versus other amenities, we had shared with the task force members that there was a potential to do some upgrades at the stadium as far as the grandstand goes, especially over here at Eisenhower. It is a multi-million-dollar endeavor, and obviously the more we add to the project, the more costly the entire project becomes. So there was some definite pushback and more conversation that needs to happen as far as that piece of the project goes. We also discussed with the task force members the possibility about hiring a consultant to help lead a capital campaign. That would be someone that the district would have to, contract with. It does come at a cost. It's whether or not that cost is upfront or if it's baked into the overall fundraising total. That's, again, something else that needs to have a little bit more conversation. And then one thing that I will mention, I know the resolution was very clear as far as the non-referendum guardrail, but it did come up many times. It came up several times from the members of the task force in the feedback that we collected about considering a capital referendum to complete a portion of or the entire project. And with that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Garza, and I'll stay here.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So I guess if we go to the next slide, I first of all appreciate the work from all the stakeholders that came together to kind of get us to where we are at this point. And I guess what I would like to do, and while I'm not asking for a decision tonight because I believe the board may have questions, we want to make sure that we come back, answer your questions, but sooner than later, we would like direction on how the board would like us to proceed. We believe, or I would like to recommend to the board that, at the end of the day, these are all going to be fundraised dollars for the most part. And I do agree that we should continue to move forward. One of our strategic goals is mutually beneficial partnerships. We've been fortunate to enter into several endeavors, whether it was the CNA lab, where we partnered with Linden Grove and WCTC, We just had, again, considerable work together with a private donor for the outdoor facility over at West. We were able to parlay our dollars with that additional support to allow us to kind of get to that end project. And now this is going to be kind of a project kind of with a significant, substantial investment of time and energy from our local stakeholders to raise dollars. I am very interested to continue to work with the NBUAF. And, you know, we've got, you know, obviously they're interested in working with us. That's why we have a couple of the members here. Thanks for being here, appreciate it. We had a very fruitful conversation a couple weeks ago. We plan on meeting with them again tomorrow. And really, it's just a matter of kind of ratcheting down and refining what we're about to move forward with, you know, assuming that the board is going to allow us to move down this path. You know, we currently do have $2 million set aside, which is, again, part of the reason why we wanted to pull together this task force in the first place. Because if we were to do something with the fields, the playing surfaces, you want to do it at the same time that you're redoing the tracks. Because otherwise, now you're ruining a track in order to build an infield and vice versa, and it just wouldn't make sense to do that not at the same time. One thing that I would ask the board to consider is, and this was brought up by the committee, is are there additional district dollars that could be committed to future projects? That's something that I'd like to continue to work with the board on. You know, some of the things that to keep in mind is, you know, if you do have somebody coming to you and saying, we think we can bring $4 million to the table or $5 million to the table, how would the board consider parlaying that with district dollars? And again, you know, we do have available funds that could be considered, you know, possibly fund balance. We do have a healthy fund balance, even though we do have a bridge to 2030 to balance budgets between now and then. But I would like the opportunity to discuss details with the board on that. That would include Finance Committee Chair Ron, and then Mitch as our Facilities Committee Chair as well. And then, you know, we would also look into considering hiring somebody to help us lead the campaign per se. Next slide, Dave. So then at the end of the day, the next steps are we want to answer all your questions. So again, not looking for a decision today, but we would like a decision sooner than later from the board once we've provided you with all responses to your questions. Please consider the recommendation that the task force provided. Dave is the chair on their behalf. Now, to me, we fulfilled our obligation as far as the resolution goes, and then allowing us to continue to move forward with working with the NBUAF group. And again, we do plan on meeting with them tomorrow, but again, we don't want to waste anybody's time if the board is not interested in pursuing something of this nature. So with that, Dave and I are here available for your questions. We may not have responses to them today, but we'll be sure to get them to you as soon as possible. Whenever you're ready.
I have like 3 quick questions. One was the green space at Ike. Is that like the practice football fields, or what are we considering that? What does that exactly
Yep,
encompass?
so it's everything essentially east of the actual stadium. There's a softball field in there, or a baseball field rather, and then there is some soccer.
To the soccer, so east of the football, west of the
Yeah,
soccer
so
fence?
if we reconfigured some things, if we could put some lights on the east side of, if we were to do grandstands over at Eisenhower, we could do some lighting as well on, that would be facing east, and
To
then
the
we could
practice
light
fields.
one of the practice fields or some of the practice fields so that we could use them longer. But that would also entail us having to switch the orientation of one of the baseball fields there and actually have it. It's currently up in the northwest corner. Home plate is. Home plate would have to be back in the southeast corner for that still to make sense and work. So that was the lowest priority when it came to the task force when they were surveyed. That was their lowest priority, but I also think it's also because it's the lowest impact as far as the students impacted and that sort of thing.
Because the use of that baseball field is pretty minimal for night need, right?
Yeah, the.
We generally need one baseball field.
Yeah, I
at
think the
each school,
general
right?
idea was, it wasn't so much for the baseball, was access to, like, this time of year, if you're still nice
Football,
out,
soccer, yeah.
you could play soccer until 9 PM with lights on. But again, that's a big assumption because that was also on the heels of doing something with the grandstand, which, again, based on the recommendation, we will likely not move in that direction because the fundraising group is not interested in that. And again, it's a lot of money for what may not be necessary at this time.
Does the grandstand need to be replaced? Like, is it a structural thing, or is it more just a comfort that we're looking?
Well,
Well-
it's a timing thing. So if you're gonna do things, you do them you're either gonna do them now, or you're gonna have to wait quite a long time, probably like if we were to do a field, we wouldn't be doing any renovations for another 12 or 13 years. And that would be the next available time, but it would allow us to do it all at the same time, which is the best. So if you've got a crane, or if you've got equipment, you've got it all here already. So it's an efficiency thing. And then secondarily, it's enhancing ADA capabilities. It's not to say that, what we currently have doesn't work, but it certainly would enhance those opportunities.
The other piece of it, Mitch, is that in order to fit a soccer field in the track, a turfed soccer field.
Expand it.
We would have to widen the track, which would then push out into that grandstand area. So whether that means eliminating the west grandstand and putting new grandstands for all fans on the east side, or some type of new configuration. So that is also a piece of it.
Okay, and then the grants you would mention, how did they get grants for doing this?
Sure. South Milwaukee they received a grant from the Green Bay Packers, which was matched by the NFL, so they ended up getting 2 grants, I believe. But they were very much based on socioeconomic status, which I don't believe that we would qualify for, although I have heard it just recently in conversation with Julie that it's possible that they are broadening that window because of the number of applicants. They're not getting as many applicants as they thought they would. Or I'm not quite sure exactly, but I'm not saying that it's not a possibility, but that was largely how they were able to get those grants.
Okay, thank you.
And I should say, I'm sorry, I know what the first third was. They got a donation of $1 million. I forget from a foundation.
Yeah.
So that was their first. That wasn't necessarily a grant; it was a gift. But that was kind of they started out with $1 million right off the bat.
Okay.
Matt.
So I'm trying to understand the funding that's needed. I think it listed on slide 7, where we're going back to the meeting of May 16th. Is this the funding that's going to attempt to be raised between 6.8 and 9
Yeah. So
plus?
the short answer is yes. However, it all depends on what exactly the scope and scale of the final project is. So if we are just focusing on multi-purpose stadiums and we decide not to do baseball and softball at this time, then that's 6.8 to 9.9. 6.8 is just doing the surfaces and tracks. That 9.9, once it climbs up to that 9.9 figure, that's including the grandstand piece and some of that new lighting that we were talking about. So I think at a minimum, 6.8 is again, these were yesterday dollars for sure. 6.8 is kind of that minimum piece that we need to get to in order for us to start talking about doing the 2 stadiums. And then once you add, and again, the reason why there's a range for baseball and softball is because you could do just infields, you can do infield outfields, you can do lighting. There are a lot of different pieces that you can do at the baseball and softball fields that add to that cost. So that 2 to 4.9 is kind of a range of all the possibilities that we could do at the as far as a baseball softball solution. So
Yeah.
again, part of that is it's hard to say what that dollar amount is, and that's one of the conversations that we need to continue to have with the NBUAF. Like what do they feel that they could help us fundraise? And part of that is what Joe was speaking to before. We have $2 million as far as the tracks go. Is the board or the district willing to commit more to that so that lowers that total fundraising dollar? So
Yeah.
that's part of the piece. We don't really know the answer to that
And a
yet.
point of clarification, the 6.8 is the track, are the tracks and the stadium surface. Note that it actually drops down to that 4.8 because of the 2 million that we've already have proposed. So,
Yeah, thanks,
you
Joe.
know,
Yeah.
so, it looks like a really big number. It's actually roughly 4.8, so you drop that because we've already got that proposed. And we continue to whittle that number even further down because we've already made some improvements. So like, I think about some of the things that we recently did over at New Berlin West because of the new facility. We had to do certain things in order to, Patrick, remind me, was there like give me one example of something that we had to fast track because of the new outdoor facility at West that no longer needs to be on this list.
And I wouldn't say it's a fast track, but for example, we're running fiber out to both of those stadiums. Because we were already doing the work at West, it only made sense to put the fiber in right away.
So we continue to refine that number, Matt, and bring that number down. In fact, our meeting tomorrow with the fundraising group is we're meeting with the contractor Point of Beginnings so that they can clarify, we can clarify, okay, what still needs to be included and or not to really get to the skinny of what the fundraising group wants to focus on.
Yeah, I'm just trying to digest what the task force recommendations is and what those outlays will be and when. And the task force recommendation slides don't state that. You kind of have to go back within the presentation to kind of figure out what that is.
Yeah, and again, part of that was, it was vague because of the unknowns at this point. So,
Fair enough, thanks.
yeah, thank you.
Are we paying that company, or is it, are they just giving us an estimate? Are they a general contractor, or what is this company that we're working with to get an estimate?
They're actually an engineering company that specializes in outdoor athletic surfaces or outdoor athletic facilities. And yes, we are paying for the drawings. That's something that we've had in our budget so that we actually have a really solid
point of
idea
beginning?
what this is gonna be. It's not just a hope and dream.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
I just want to say I was able to sit as a participant of the task force, really just a watcher. Renee and I were just kind of sitting there to watch it. And there's a lot of passion from that group to go about and get this fundraising. I would suggest, and just throw this out there, something, if we could do something like meet every dollar they raise or something, just to have like some excitement about raising the money, if we can, obviously afford it within our budget. But I think matching dollar for dollar would be a way that we could encourage fundraising as well.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, which is what's been done in several other districts as well. And obviously, I'm not sure that I would recommend dollar for every dollar, but a dollar for dollar up to a certain amount is something that I think, we can continue to talk to the board about to see, what is, but I do think, that is something that, that has been voiced strongly by the group that, yeah, we'd be willing to do all this, but is there more room from the board? And again, we're optimistic that we think we could get there to a certain degree.
Have we looked at Julie taking this on? I mean, she's already doing the foundation. I don't know how much of a full-time, there's no one better, right? I mean, she's stepped in and done a fantastic job, and I think this is probably right up her alley. She's gonna be cannibalizing her current funds
So,
going to
so
there
right
a
now,
little
yeah,
bit.
so two things with that. Number one is, we do think that we can, the foundation would be a very useful tool for this project, in some capacity. I don't believe that, asking Julie and the foundation to take this on fully, makes sense to all the other priorities that she has. Right now, I mean, she's doing great work with the impact grants, the scholarships, and all those programs. And this is something that would require full focus, and I think those other programs that impact a lot of students and a lot of staff would certainly fall by the wayside and be very difficult to continue to maintain. I do think there is a lot of room for her in order to help either with the NBUAF or in other capacities as far as lending some expertise or using her donor software or things like that, I would be hesitant to try to push the entire project onto the foundation, because I think it would be at a detriment to the other programs that she's running.
Fair enough. I just want to throw out, I support the idea of this in theory. I think if we can get some numbers around what we're looking at doing with that, so that we have some numbers from the fundraising. Are they going to bring in do they think they can bring in 3 million in 3 years or 5 million in 1 year? What is that kind of thought that they can do? I do have some strong feelings about bringing a consultant in to do the fundraising and paying them X amount of money to just do it. It would really have to be based on how much money they bring in, because I think that can go sideways pretty quick and we can end up upside down on that. Sure.
And I was wondering exactly what would a consultant be doing?
Yeah, so again, it's one of those things where it's a little bit vague because we haven't really gotten into the whole all the possibilities yet. But essentially, they can help run the entire campaign. So they can start from like developing the timeline, developing the goals, making sure that groups, the volunteer groups or the district or whomever else is meeting all the deadlines that we've set, because it is a very deadline-driven project. As far as, you have to have the funds before you can start putting a shovel into the ground and that sort of thing. So there are individuals and companies out there who they're into the philanthropic projects such as this, that do this, for a living, and they're much smarter than I am, or in regards to this, they're smarter than I am. I don't know about everything else. It's a range of tasks and skill sets that they would bring to the project. But to your point, Mitch, yes, it's something that we need to be really sure that we have. I'm sorry, they also do some well screening, that sort of thing. They kind of look and see what other donors have given to projects within our community already, so they have some of those tools that we don't have access to and we don't know anything about. So that's part of that piece too.
But point taken. And I think there are different cost-setting structures, that's commission-based versus just, we're just going to give you money just to do this. I do think that that's something that, again, depending on where we land, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves until we know where the board wants us to go.
As far as the school board approving funds to go towards this, my understanding was that this was sort of like more of a long-range type of a deal here. This wasn't something like necessarily right now, because we know we have a plan. Within 5 years, we should have that debt paid. So is this something really that we're looking to as far as a district contributing money towards once we start having more room in the budget to do that?
I'm not sure that we would have to wait that long, only because, again, I do think we have a healthy fund balance that would still get us, so even though we have our, 2030 plan to bridge us to where we, eliminate most of that debt within the operating budget, even despite that, we still have a healthy fund balance. And again, I think I may have mentioned this before, you don't want to use fund balance for recurring costs. You want to use fund balance for capital costs, like in this case. And I think we'd be well within the range of the board policy of maintaining, I believe it's at least 10% of the budgeted fund balance. I think, even after that drawdown that we currently have planned, Janet, for the 2030, I think we would end up at roughly 22 or 23%, Patrick? Ish. And so we would still have, again, and if we've got a community group that's finally come together, that's motivated to do something, I do think there's opportunity there that could be within the next 5 years. And then at the end of the day, how quickly are they going to be able to raise those funds is TBD. And so it's also a matter of, group, I have confidence in them, right? But then there's a reality of it. And, if they're pulling in, $1 million donor here and there, then that window is going to close. And again, I do think that there's potential there up to a certain point.
Would this qualify for Fund 41 if we put more money through that to pay for these things, or does that not qualify?
The district money would go through that.
Okay. So that would reduce our spending, however DPI looks at that for the
Yeah,
future years.
that would positively impact shared cost.
Okay, thank you. So if we did start doing this, we'd have to start putting money in there in the next couple of
next
years.
budget.
Probably the next budget, the year after that at least.
If you remember, we had a really great plan that we put off for a year, so we'll be revisiting that.
Any other questions?
All right.
If you have questions between now and the next meeting, because I am going to ask the board to have some action to allow us to move forward, we'll put that on the agenda next meeting, but if you do have questions between now and then, please send them our way and get them to me as soon as you can so that we have time to put together the information. And then I will ask Dave to actually get an update of our meeting with the foundation organization, the fundraising group, when we meet with them tomorrow.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all the committee members. All right, we do have an action item from closed session. Do I have a motion?
I move to improve the employment services report as presented.
I have a motion by Ms. Spindler and a second by Ms. Crosby to approve the employment services report. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion passes. Then we have our future meetings and dates. Board meetings are generally held here on the second and fourth Mondays, beginning at 7:00 p.m., unless otherwise noted. So our next meeting is November 25th. Then we have a meeting December 9th, which is the only meeting in December. Other important events and dates, November 27th is a staff in service, there's no school. November 28th through 29th is the Thanksgiving holiday, no school. We are going to return to closed session, and then we will adjourn in closed session. So do I have a motion to return to closed session to discuss approve the superintendent goals for 2024, 2025?
So moved.
You should say the whole thing pursuant to
Oh.
the statute.
Madam President, I move to adjourn to closed session pursuant to section 19.851C, E, and F of the Wisconsin statutes to consider goals and objectives.
I have a motion by Mr. Helmer, a second by Ms. Crosby to return to closed session. Please call the roll.
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Ms. Konick,
Yes.
Ms. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Seidel,
Yes.
Ms. Spindler,
Yes.
Mr. Zelinski.
Yes.
We are moving into closed session, and we will adjourn from there. Thank you.